Have you ever wondered what happens when a nation's destiny hangs by a thread? When the promise of a golden future clashes with an unsettling whisper of doubt? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most pivotal moments in recent African history. A story of courage, foresight, and a decision that defied all expectations. Before we unravel this gripping tale, if you're as fascinated by stories of leadership and economic sovereignty as we are, make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit that like button to help us share these powerful narratives, and comment below with your thoughts as the story unfolds. Your engagement fuels our mission to bring you these untold sagas. Now, let us begin. The air in President Ibrahim Traoré's modest residence, nestled on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, hung heavy with the scent of jasmine tea gone cold and the unspoken hopes of a desperate nation. Outside, the city's evening lights twinkled, a deceptive promise of prosperity in a land where wealth remained an elusive dream for far too many. Inside, around a gleaming wooden meeting table, a nation's future was poised on the razor's edge of a single decision. Burkina Faso, the land of the upright people, was a nation rich in spirit but crippled by circumstance. Decades of struggle had left it reeling from the pervasive grip of poverty. Hospitals, mere shells of what they should be, boasted a heartbreaking scarcity of resources. For every 2 million children, a children's ward might cling to just 3 breathing machines. Schools, often rudimentary structures, lacked even the most basic supplies, while classrooms overflowed with eager young minds desperate for an education that could lift them out of their plight. Over 70% of the population toiled in basic farming, often yielding barely enough to survive, and preventable diseases claimed thousands of lives annually. The atmosphere was one of profound need, a deep, aching yearning for a breakthrough. It was into this crucible of desperation that the Chinese group arrived, bearing an offer that shimmered with the promise of salvation. Money Minister Adrego, his hands trembling slightly as he spread glossy papers across the table, his voice cracking with the sheer weight of expectation, whispered, "Mr. President, this is our miracle, $50 billion. His words, imbued with a desperate urgency, painted a vivid picture of a transformed Burkina Faso. $50 billion, he reiterated, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and relief. Railways connecting us to the coast, forging vital trade routes, hospitals equipped with modern life-saving equipment, schools that could rival those in Paris, providing an education worthy of our children." The leather folders left behind by the Chinese delegation were brimming with architectural renderings and economic projections, visions of shining airports, superhighways cutting through red earth, and the untapped potential of mining sites that promised to make Burkina Faso wealthy beyond thought. Defense Minister Kabore leaned forward, his voice urgent with conviction. "Sir, 200,000 jobs in Phase 1 alone. This could end the crisis overnight." Economic Minister Cao, his eyes bright with unbridled hope, added to the chorus. "And the lithium deposits, Mr. President? Chinese surveys show $200 billion in reserves, and we keep 30% ownership." Even Health Minister Kerry, a man accustomed to the grim realities of their under-resourced wards, spoke softly but with profound hope. This deal could save thousands of lives. The numbers were staggering, a sum more colossal than their nation had ever conceived since achieving independence. It was a golden ticket, a lifeline. Yet as Traoré surveyed the eager, expectant faces of his cabinet, a cold, unsettling feeling settled deep within his stomach. He saw their desperation, understood their fervent hope, but something about the sheer magnitude of the giving felt off. A silent alarm, almost imperceptible, began to echo in the quiet chambers of his mind. Everyone saw salvation, but President Ibrahim Traoré saw a test of whether Africa was truly ready for the harder path of true independence. The silence that followed Health Minister Kerry's plea, "This deal could save thousands of lives," was profound, stretching like a taut wire across the polished table. President Traoré, his gaze sweeping over the eager, hopeful faces of his cabinet, felt that cold knot in his stomach tighten. The numbers were indeed colossal, dizzying in their potential, yet the unease persisted, a quiet discord against the chorus of enthusiasm. He knew, with an instinct honed by years of navigating treacherous paths, that the most enticing offers often hid the sharpest hooks. "Have you read every paper?" Traoré asked, his voice cutting through the expectant hush, calm but with an unexpected edge. A ripple of confused looks spread around the table. Of course they had, or so they believed. Money Minister Edrego, still flushed with the vision of immediate salvation, shifted nervously. "Mr. President," he began, a hint of bewilderment in his tone, "we've reviewed hundreds of pages, legal language, technical specifications, detailed money predictions." He gestured vaguely at the stacks of documents, a mountain of intricate clauses and footnotes, "including the extra rules and the debt reshaping clauses. Standard terms, sir. Standard repayment terms, backup agreements in case of failure." "What backup?" "Port access rights, some mining deals, land leases, but only if we completely fail. Standard practice." Edrego's words, meant to reassure, only deepened Traoré's resolve. "Standard practice," he echoed, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his voice. He reached beneath the table, pulling forth his own, far slimmer, but infinitely more dangerous secret folder. Inside lay the culmination of weeks of painstaking intelligence gathered through unofficial back channels, through friends in nations far and wide who had walked a similar path. "According to our friends in Sri Lanka," Traoré began, opening the folder and laying out a few stark sheets of paper, "standard means sure to happen." The room fell silent once more, but this time the quiet was heavy with apprehension. As Traoré began to read, the jovial atmosphere of just moments before evaporated, replaced by a growing chill. He recounted stories from other African leaders, from nations across the globe, who had signed similar deals, seduced by the promise of rapid development. Sri Lanka, for instance, had borrowed heavily for port building. Now, deeply indebted, China controlled its Hambantota port for 99 years. Pakistan, too, had embraced the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, only to find debt spiraling, giving China effective control over Gwadar port and major highways. "But what happened next?" Traoré continued, his teacher's instincts kicking in as he watched understanding, slow and grim, dawn on his ministers' faces. "This isn't growth aid, gentlemen. This is money engineering. It is designed to transfer ownership of important assets." He spread out a series of calculations, stark numbers generated by his own economic team. "Alone, based on our current income, we could service maybe 40% of these debt payments. Our lithium won't generate income for 5 years, but the loan payments start right away." Money Minister Edrego, who moments ago had been radiating hope, studied the predictions, color drained from his face, leaving it pale and shocked. "Our numbers," he murmured, barely audible, "our numbers show failure within 18 months. "Exactly," Traoré confirmed, his voice heavy with the weight of betrayal. "Here's what happens then." He pointed to specific lines in his own documents, the hidden clauses that had been so casually dismissed as standard. "Upon failure, China would take working control of the entire railway system. They would acquire comprehensive mining rights, not just for lithium, but for other valuable minerals. And vast farming zones would be designated as special economic areas, areas where Burkina Faso's sovereignty would be diluted, effectively transferring control." Defense Minister Kabore's voice was barely heard, a hoarse whisper. "They're not putting money in us, Mr. President. They're buying us on payments." "And it gets even darker," Traoré said, his voice now a low rumble of indignation. "Angola owes China $20 billion. Chinese companies now control their oil exports. Ethiopia borrowed $13 billion. China manages their port access and rail transport. Zambia's copper mines, they now work under Chinese management after their debt reshaping." The patterns were clear, stark, and utterly devastating. Every nation that had accepted China's generous terms had, within years, given up a piece of its economic freedom, its sovereignty. "But sir," Edrago begged, his eyes pleading, "what other choice exists? Our people suffer while we debate freedom." The question hung in the room, thick and suffocating like smoke from dying hopes. Every minister waited, their gazes fixed on Traoré, for an answer that would define their nation's destiny. They had been offered salvation, but it had revealed itself as a meticulously laid trap.
The question from Money Minister Edrago, "What other choice exists? Our people suffer while we debate freedom," hung in the air, a desperate echo of a nation's collective despair. Every minister in that room, their faces etched with the stark realization of the trap, looked to President Traoré for an answer. The silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic beat of their own hearts. They had been offered a poisoned chalice, but the thirst for progress was overwhelming. Then Ibrahim Traoré spoke, and his words, seemingly impossible given their dire financial limits, resonated with a quiet, unshakable conviction that cut through the despair. "We build it ourselves." The statement seemed to defy logic, to mock their very circumstances. Construction would take decades, not years, as economic minister Saw looked doubtful, murmuring about the sheer scale of the undertaking. But Traoré's voice gained strength, fueled by an inner belief that burned brighter than any fleeting gold rush. "Burkina Faso has $15 billion in proven gold reserves," he declared, his gaze sweeping over each of them. "Our lithium is worth $200 billion at current prices. We don't need Chinese money. We need Chinese knowledge, paid for at market rates." He began to outline his audacious vision, not with grand promises of instant gratification, but with a blueprint for genuine, lasting development. Technology transfer agreements, not debt contracts. Engineering skills, not land deals. We maintain ownership of every railway mile, every hospital bed, every school classroom. He spoke of local mining groups forming, committed to sustainable methods using domestic savings. He envisioned technical schools blossoming, fostering knowledge transfer programs without the shackles of land concessions. "Built by African hands," Traoré replied firmly, his eyes alight. "Owned by African people, serving African futures." It would be slower, yes, a painstaking ascent brick by brick, but every single one would belong entirely to Burkina Faso's people. If his cabinet had been shocked by his declaration, the world was about to be rocked. The very next morning, Traoré personally placed a call that would become legendary. His entire cabinet bore witness as he calmly addressed Chinese Ambassador Chun Wei. "Ambassador Chun," Traoré began, his voice devoid of anger, merely resolute, "Burkina Faso thanks China for its offer. However, we must respectfully decline the current terms." A loud, crackling silence followed. Finally, Chun's voice, strained with disbelief, came through the line. "Mr. President, $50 billion. No African nation has received such giving." "Which," Traoré replied, his composure unyielding, "is precisely why I'm certain there are special reasons for such terms. After analysis, we've identified those reasons. Debt trap diplomacy." "You are making a grave mistake," Chun retorted, his tone hardening. "This offer will not be repeated." "I'm counting on that," Traoré said quietly, and ended the call. Within hours, the story ruled international headlines. Western media praised Traoré's courage, lauding his defiance against Chinese economic control. Chinese state media condemned it, accusing him of keeping Africa poor. But the most significant reactions came from within Africa. African presidents, having been offered strikingly similar generous deals, called Traoré within days, describing their own reconsiderations. 6 months later, the African Union had set new guidelines for foreign money evaluation, and an early warning system was created to identify debt trap schemes. Most importantly, an African Development Bank initiative began providing alternative building financing, a testament to a continent stirring awake. The change within Burkina Faso was remarkable. Traoré's no had sparked a national conversation about self-reliance, igniting a quiet revolution. Young engineers postponed plans to leave, seeing opportunities to build their homeland. Progress was slower than Chinese timelines promised, but every single brick, every newly trained hand, every shared idea belonged unequivocally to Burkina Faso's people. 1 year later, addressing the African Union, Traoré declared, "When China offered $50 billion, they weren't offering growth. They were offering dependence with better building." Clapping rippled through the assembly as he continued, his voice ringing with conviction. True growth cannot be borrowed or gifted. It can only be built by people who will live with its results. The most meaningful response came in a handwritten letter from a school student. "Mr. President, my family was angry when you said no to Chinese money. We needed hospitals and roads. But now I understand. You didn't say no to growth. You chose dignity." Reading those words, surrounded by building plans designed by Burkina Faso engineers and funded by Burkina Faso's own resources, Traoré thought about the choice that had defined his presidency. When his money minister begged him to sign that deal, everyone saw salvation. But Traoré saw a test of whether Africa was ready for true independence's harder path. His answer echoed across a continent. They were ready. And that choice was worth more than all the Chinese gold. And that concludes our incredible story of President Ibrahim Traoré's bold stand for Burkina Faso's dignity and independence. We hope you were as inspired by this tale as we were. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a pivotal moment in history, please make sure to like this video, share it with your family and friends, and leave your comments below. We love hearing your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next compelling narrative. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.